Hello and welcome. Today we are cracking the code on something that is without a doubt one of the most critical parts of education. You see, a student's vocabulary is probably the single most greatest predictor of their success in school. Knowing words, really knowing them, is the key that unlocks everything. Let's dive in. Here's our first big question, one that I think every teacher asks themselves. Why is it that some students just seem to take off? Their vocabularies explode, while other kids who are just as bright or smart seem to get stuck. Well, it turns out there's a name for this. Back in 1986, a researcher named Kenneth Stanovich called it the Matthew effect, pulling from that biblical line, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And it's a powerful idea. Kids who start with strong vocabularies find reading easier, so they read more, which of course builds their vocabulary even more. But for kids who struggle, reading is a chore, so they do it less. And that vocabulary gap just gets wider. And if you want to see what that gap looks like in real numbers, well, get a load of this. A student who reads for less than a single minute a night sees about 21,000 words in a year, which sounds like a lot, right? But look at the student who reads for just over 20 minutes a day. They're exposed to almost 2 million words. That's not a gap, my friends. That is a canyon. It's absolutely staggering. So, yeah, this widening word gap, it's a huge challenge. But here's the good news. It's not inevitable. With the right strategies, with a really clear framework, we can absolutely close this gap for our students. The question is, how do we do it? Well, all the research points to a kind of 1-2 punch. Think of it like this. We've got two essential tools in our toolkit. We've got direct instruction and we've got indirect instruction. And they're not enemies, they're partners. You need both to do the job right. And I absolutely love this analogy here. Direct or explicit instruction, that's your spotlight. You're deliberately choosing a handful of really important words and shining a bright, intense light on them. On the other hand, indirect instruction is your floodlight. The goal here is just broad exposure, exposing the students to a word rich environment where students are constantly bumping into new language through reading and listening. Okay, so now we know that we need a spotlight and a floodlight, but that brings up some pretty important questions. Where do we point the spotlight? I mean, there's thousands of words out there. Which one gives us the most bang for our buck? Well, for that, we turn to a truly brilliant framework from Isabella Beck and her colleagues who sorted words into three simple tiers. First off, we have tier one words. These are the words of everyday speech, and most of our kids are pretty okay with these, unless they are multilingual learners. Then they need some extra practice. And now it's time for every teacher's sweet spot, tier two. These are what you would call general academic words. Think of words like analyze, compare, formulate, or beneficial. You don't hear these a lot on the playground, but you see them everywhere in books, in articles, and textbooks across all subjects. These are the words that unlock comprehension, and they are the absolute prime candidates for our teaching spotlight. And finally, we've got tier three. These words are the specialists. They're the domain specific words like photosynthesis in science or legislature in social studies, circumference in math. They're super important for understanding a specific subject, and we usually teach them right in the moment as part of that particular lesson. So, this little chart here really sums it all up perfectly. Tier one, everyday stuff. Tier three, the specific jargon. But it's that middle ground, tier two, where we can make the biggest impact with our direct instruction, building that bridge from conversational language to academic language. All right, framework check. Now let's get practical. It's time to actually build our toolkit. What are the proven research backed things we can do for both our floodlight and our spotlight approaches? So, for our indirect floodlight, the name of the game is immersion. We just have to create a world drenched in words. This means encouraging kids to read everything they can get their hands on across all different genres. It also means reading high quality, complex texts aloud to them, yes, even the older kids. Let them hear how beautiful complex language sounds. The more words they hear and see in context, the more they just soak it up. Okay, now for the spotlight. Here's a super effective 5-step process. First, be picky. Choose just the really important tier two words from whatever you're reading. Step two, give them a definition they can actually understand. a student friendly one, not something you just copied from the dictionary. 3, break the words apart. Look at its prefix, its suffix, its root. Be word detectives. 4, teach them how to use context clues to make a smart guess. And 5, and this is probably the most important one, repeat, repeat, repeat. They need to see, hear, and use that new word over and over again in all sorts of different ways. The ultimate goal isn't just to teach a list of words for a test on Friday. It's much bigger than that. We're trying to cultivate a certain way of thinking, a certain way of being in the world. We want to create what's called word consciousness. And what is that? It's basically an interest in and an awareness of words. It's when students start to notice language. They get excited about a cool sounding word. They enjoy playing with puns and rhymes. They notice when an author uses that perfect verb to describe something. They become collectors of words, and we can foster this in our classrooms. We can point out those amazing descriptions when we're reading. We can ask students to be on the lookout for interesting words and share them with the class. We can celebrate language and celebrate wordplay. So, at the end of the day, here's the big takeaway. We've got to shift our mindset away from just teaching vocabulary lessons. The real goal is to help our students truly own their words, to feel comfortable with them, to play with them, to use them to express their own unique ideas with power and with precision. So, by combining the broad floodlight of the rich language exposure with a super focused spotlight on those key academic words, we can not only close the word gap, but we can also spark a lifelong love of language. The only question left is, how will you open up the incredible world of words for your students this week?